everybody. Just a little intro to this video. I initially start out by saying that I'm going to time step everything. I'm going to include the Adelson, what happened during the Charles Adelson case on this video. But by the time I got done talking about Sally Smith in the Kowalski case, we were already 40 minutes in. So I am doing a separate video for the opening statements of the Charles Adelson case. So look for that video to come out today as well. But here is the Kowalski case. Take care. Hey everybody, welcome to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm your host, Rebecca, and I recap live trials so you have something to listen to while you're crafting. So today, get out whatever your large project is because we have a lot to cover. We're going to go over the Sally Smith testimony in the Maya Kowalski case, and we're going to go over the opening statements in the state of Florida versus Charles Adelson. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. My background is in nursing. I was a registered nurse for many, many years, and I was also a registered nurse attorney. I did medical malpractice and nursing home defense out of the state of Florida. I know, but so I'm uniquely familiar with the state. Let's just put it that way, and the laws in the state of Florida. So currently, I am trying to finish up this Halloween painting. I've already completed one Halloween painting. I was ambitious, trying to do two. I have less than a week, but I think we'll get there. So yesterday I opened up all of this and I'm almost done with it. Just have to fill in a little bit more. I'm hoping by tonight I can get a little bit more, and then I don't know. I think I'll have it done by the weekend, but there's the whole thing. This is all done in crystals. Diamonds, we call them diamonds or drills. They can be made out of acrylic, they can be made out of resin, or they can be crystals. And I'm doing crystals right now. The two paintings I did for Halloween, crystals. Oh, gorgeous. The colors are they're blowing my mind, these colors. They really are. So, but you can also be crocheting. I had to stop crocheting. I had to put it down for a few days. I'm not willing to commit to more than a few days because I've got a lot of projects I want to get to. But when I hit my thumb on that fan the other night, or it's either that or overuse with this thumb. I've had a joint replacement here and it's been really sore. The same thing with my finger. You know how the yarn crosses your finger? It's almost like a rug burn there. So I'm just letting my hand rest, which is hard to do because I love to crochet while I'm watching television. I also do watercolor painting and cross stitch. I haven't picked up the cross stitch in months, and I need to. I got a brand new cross stitch magazine, the Christmas edition, in the mail yesterday. I was drooling. I haven't opened it yet, but I was drooling. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Kowalski case, and then we will talk about what happened in the Charles Adelson case. Now, if you want to hear one and not the other, please look down below in the description. I will have everything timestamped so you can see in what section you want to watch. Yeah. So thank you for subscribing. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button while you're here today. If you can't stay for the whole thing, I understand. If you're on the go, this is also available as a podcast on YouTube Music. Yep. So in the Kowalski case, this is Maya Kowalski. It has everything to do with whether she was a victim of medical child abuse by her mom, Beata, and her father, Jack. More Beata than Jack. They weren't really concerned about Jack. So Beata ended up after Maya, after being taken to the emergency room by her parents with abdominal pain and a diagnosis of CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, that had been made by other professionals in the community, she goes to Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital in St. Petersburg, and she is admitted, and her mom is insisting on these huge amounts of ketamine, like ridiculous amounts of ketamine. And the staff are like, what in the world? So, so the emergency room doctor, calls Sally Smith. Sally Smith is the medical director of the Child Protection Team, which is it is a division of the Department of Health, and that their function, the Child Protective Team's function, is to investigate child abuse and then report their findings to the Department of Children and Families, who has the ability to open a case in court. So Sally Smith was on the stand yesterday, and her testimony was quite limited because the judge has been narrowing down the allegations in this case, because the allegations in this case are wrongful death, because ultimately, after being denied access to her daughter, Beata Kowalski took her own life. 5 days after she takes her own life, miracle, the court releases her back to her father, and she gets discharged from John Hopkins Children's Hospital, and she goes home and lives her life without ketamine. Yeah. Anyway, I know my bias is starting to show. Stop it, Rebecca. Stop it. Okay, so Sally Smith took the stand yesterday. Now, previous to this, the jury had seen a lot of her testimony through deposition. And there had been prior rulings that she was appearing as a treating physician, not as an expert. So they're not allowed to go into what her report says. They're not allowed to go into what her findings were. Just, what the whole issue is, was she acting as an agent of the hospital, or was she acting as an employee of the Department of Health, the Child Protective Team? So that's the huge issue we have here. Now, Sally Smith is a pediatrician by trade. She currently has her own pediatric practice where she sees private patients. She no longer works for the Child Protective Team. She um, resigned her position back in July. I don't know what the impetus of that was, but I got to tell you, just a little bit of an aside here. On her way into the courthouse yesterday, apparently she got a little lost. She went to the wrong building. So she goes to court all the time, but not this court. In Palm Beach, no, where is this? This is Sarasota. So I guess she didn't know where the courthouse was. I'm thinking Palm Beach, wrong case. So in Sarasota, she had not been to this courthouse, or maybe they do. I'm thinking they must do the dependency hearings somewhere else. I'm not sure. Anyways, she finds the courthouse, and as she's coming into the building with her 7 binders, this woman brought 7 3 to 4 inch binders with her to appear as a witness. So she's walking into the courthouse with her binders. This man approaches her and starts berating her. Now, apparently, this man spent over a year in jail based on allegations Sally Smith made against him for medical child abuse. And he was exonerated of the charges and set free, but he was going to let her know what he thought of her. She's probably one of the most hated women in this country right now, based purely on the Take Care of Maya program, where they did highlight this exact person who confronted her, as well as other individuals who have been the victim of Sally Smith's medical investigations or child abuse investigations. She's a pit bull, this woman. I lost something here. Lost in translation. Okay, I don't need it. I'm going to try to do some diamond painting while I talk to you. I don't always do well with 2 things at once, which is why you see me hesitating sometimes. Okay, I need the light pad on. If you ever have questions about stuff that I'm crafting, come to one of my lives. I do lives on Wednesdays and Sundays. And feel free to just ask me whatever you need to ask me. Where did I get the diamond painting? It's a Crystal Canvas Arts Design diamond painting. Go on the internet, look up crystalcanvasarts.us, and you'll find that company. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay. So Sally Smith testified she went to the prestigious St. Louis School of Medicine. Never heard of it. Have you? No. And after that, she came to Florida. She, after she did her residency in pediatrics, she came to Florida. And she has been practicing medicine out of, it used to be called All Children's Hospital. All Children's Hospital, which is now John Hopkins. She's been practicing there for 32 years. So since the 90s. But she said, in the 80s, when she became interested in the child, evaluating children for child abuse, it wasn't a specialty back then. It is now. But in the 80s, it was not. So there was no fellowship in this uh, realm of pediatrics. So she admitted to the jury that she had on the job training. She learned as she went. So when in the 90s, when they did come out with this child abuse expert or child abuse pediatrician category, she was kind of grandfathered in. They said you either have to do a fellowship in this area of medicine, or someone can recommend that you be let in based on your training and experience, and you had to have at least 5 years experience in diagnosing child abuse. So she took the test, and she's now certified in child abuse. We'll wait for the clock. Sorry, I need to get rid of that thing. That actually sounds pretty good today. Some days it sounds very sick. It just depends on the day. Um, I have to tell you though, just another aside that had anything to do with her testimony. When Sally Smith first sat down, she's getting out the binders. One, two, 7 binders, 3 to 5 inch binders. She's got them all stacked up on the witness stand with her. And I will tell you that her demeanor towards the jury was, she came out across a lot less harsh than she did in the deposition that they showed to the jury. She didn't have her hair up in this severe, I don't know if she had a ponytail or what. Her hair was up in the deposition. Now she's got it down and flowing, and she's got a makeup, and she looks much younger than she did in the video. She looks much softer. They kind of softened her up. She's got like a floral blouse underneath a, a casual suit jacket. And she's very, she's explaining everything to the jury, talking directly to them. She's done this many, many times. Talking to a judge, not a jury, but in any case, she's caught on. And it was very clear that she had been coached, not by the defense attorney, but by her own attorney, who told her exactly how to answer these questions. And the first thing he must have told her was, you must preface every question by saying, as part of my investigation, as not even investigation, as part of my, how did she put it? Examination. As part of my examination. As part of my examination. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So I'm trying to think, where did I leave off? Okay, so in 2002, prior to 2002, Sally Smith she had her own pediatric practice, and she worked at Johns Hopkins as, how did she put it? She actually worked for the hospital, all children's, not Johns Hopkins. She, I don't know if she had her own private practice or not, but she worked for all children's hospital, seeing the children, um, and part time during the next 12 years as a member of the child protection team. But what all children's would do is if she saw a child because of a report that came into the child protection team, and she did her examination and report back to the child protection team, all children's hospital would bill her time to the Department of Health, whose CPT comes under the Department of Health. But in 2002, she was asked if she could be the medical director of the child protection team. So she tried to do that and stay employed by All Children's, but it became too difficult. So she resigned from All Children's. She still had her staff privileges. Privileges just kind of get you in the door. You have, in order to get medical staff privileges that say that you can come into the hospital and see patients, your own patients or patients that you've been ordered to see by the child protective team, you have to have privileges. So you have to fill out an application. You have to go through a arduous vetting process, appear before the credentialing committee. There's a lot of things they have to find out if you've had any adverse reports to the national data bank. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's involved in credentialing. Um, and there's also sometimes claims for negligent credentialing. But anyway, she was credentialed. She's been credentialed for many, many years. And once you get credentialed, getting re-credentialed is easy peasy, really. There's a few things they have to check. They have to periodically keep checking. But yeah, you're there. So you're in the door. So she talked about the makeup of the child protection team, because this is something I wasn't familiar with. It's a multidisciplinary team that is made up of the medical director, ARMPs that specialize in this as well, case coordinators, which are social workers, psychologists, and attorneys. And the way that this child protection team is sort of activated or moved to start investigating is through your people reporting uh, suspected abuse, neglect, and exploitation to the Department of Children and Families. Then DCF will call CPT and they'll say, we need you to go out and conduct an examination or investigation into Beata Kowalski, for lack of a better example. So, and then they conduct their investigation, and then their report gets sent back to the Department of Children and Families, and then based on their report, they take action. They either open a court case, and as they did in this case, remove the parents from seeing the child and order a shelter in place order, entered a shelter in place order, the judge, which is what happened here. But how did Sally Smith get involved in this case? This is really interesting, and this is where the waters get really muddy as to who she was working for at the time she did her examination. So she's home on a Saturday and she gets a phone call from the ER physician. So the question to her was this call from the emergency room physician in your role as a member of the child protective team, as the medical director of the child protective team, or was it in your capacity as a member of the medical staff and they were consulting with you? She goes, I took it to mean uh, it was a phone call from a colleague, a fellow person, staff member who needed some advice and who knew for the past 32 years that uh, I'm the person with the most knowledge regarding that subject matter, the child abuse. So she gets a call that Saturday. Now, she's not allowed to go out and conduct an examination unless she gets an order from the child protective team to do so, or from the Department of Children and Families. Someone has to report it to DCF. Then DCF will order them to go do an investigation. That had not happened yet when she got that phone call on Saturday. On Monday, it happens. Someone calls, and we still don't know. She was asked by the jury, like, who made the report, and she never did say. So where was I? Oh, on that Monday, someone does report it, and DCF does hire this child protective team to go in and conduct an examination. But when she got the call on Saturday, because she's a member of the medical staff, she has access to the electronic medical record, and she can go in and look at anybody she wants. This is what she's telling the jury. In reality, you are not allowed. Like, anybody who works in a hospital has access to the medical record. But because of HIPAA, the Federal Privacy Act, you are not allowed to look at anybody's medical records, including your own medical records. Like if you went to the ER over the weekend and you want to see, what the ER doctor actually recorded in your medical record, you are not allowed to do that. If you want to see your own medical record, you have to put in a request with the medical record department, you know, and ask for a copy of your medical record and pay for it. But so she's not just willy-nilly allowed to go in and look at anybody she wants, even though she's telling the jury, yeah, I can do that because I'm a member of the medical staff. I'll tell you a little story. I was, as a risk manager, we had a doctor who was upset because he was supposed to start a surgery. He couldn't start the surgery because there was an emergency that bumped him out of the OR. Someone went in and said, I have an emergency, so he had to wait. He was not happy because he had to wait for the emergency to finish up in the OR that he wanted. So he goes to the physician's lounge and he proceeds to look up the medical record of the case that bumped him to see if it really was an emergency. That had to be reported to the federal government as a privacy violation. And I got into a big argument with the medical director. He's like, no, 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 he doesn't. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. That is a HIPAA violation and it has to be reported. Yeah. After that, the medical director and I never got along again because he was pissed that I knew more than he did. I'm like, listen, I'm an attorney. I'm telling you, he violated it. Anyway, back to Sally Smith. So did she. But that's another thing. So she looks at my Kowalski's records. So then Monday comes and the report gets made. Now she comes into the hospital. Now, was she wearing a lab coat? She says, at the time, she says, I went for 20 years. I didn't even own a lab coat. She goes, I own a lab coat now and I wear it in my private practice. But when I go into the hospital, she goes, I'm just wearing like business casual. But I do wear the name tag that John Hopkins issued her. And one of the reasons you want to wear this name tag, and I get it, is it gets you in the door. Literally, it's the door, it's a key. You have to put your badge in certain places to get into certain areas of the hospital. So, should it have said on the badge who she really worked for? Probably. It could say John Hopkins, but it could actually have her as, medical director of the child protection team, medical director of CPT or whatever. But it didn't. It had John Hopkins, it had her name. I'm assuming all this, otherwise we wouldn't be arguing over this. So I'm just trying to see where I am in my notes. So her job is to conduct a medical evaluation as part of the child protective team. It is not to recommend treatment. She doesn't do any progress notes. She doesn't issue any orders. However, in this case, we know that she recommended that she be taken off her medications. She recommended she go into that EEG room for 48 hours so they could observe her. Um, she says she does a round on patients on a regular basis, which she didn't. Um, so she got involved. She said she interviewed Beata Kowalski and Jack Kowalski, but when she interviewed Beata, she said what they did was they set she reserved this family room that was outside of the ICU. And she said she was late for the meeting, but when she comes into the meeting, Beata is already in the meeting with two people from law enforcement, police officers, and what were the other two people? Oh, two private investigators. So she walks in the room. There's already five people in there, four very intimidating people, and now she walks in. Poor Beata. Oh my God. Can you imagine being confronted by two police officers, two private investigators, and the medical director for the child protective team? Holy, Beata must have wet her pants. I'm telling you, I would. So, um, she said she never held herself out as being Maya's treating doctor. She identified herself. She goes, I always, when she said, how did you introduce yourself? She said, I always say, I'm Sally Smith, medical director of the Child Protective Team. I'm here to do, you know, a medical evaluation. So absolutely, they knew who she was. And she only visited Maya twice for 5 to 15 minutes each time. Twice. First in October, um, the day that the shelter order goes into place. And the day that she saw her, she declined to be evaluated. Maya said no. Mm-mm. So then she went back in early November and conducted her evaluation. Now, here's my question. How, if they entered that shelter order on the 13th, and this woman didn't get to evaluate her until early November, how did she conclude that there was child abuse before that? I don't know. She said she spoke to the parents separately. I didn't mention that, but it was separate. So, an interesting question that was asked to her by Mr. Anderson, who's the plaintiff's attorney. He said, if nurses say that they are moving slowly uh, in response to Maya's requests, for example, when she would call to go to the bathroom, within that 48 hours, they had put the bedside commode outside of her reach. It was next to the bed, but she would have to get out of bed to go to it, which kind of defeats the purpose of it. Anyway, when she would call to go to the bathroom, the nurses would slowly go to help her out. So Anderson asked her, is that child abuse? Now, of course, at that point, they all go sidebar, and she didn't have to answer the question, but I loved the question. I took a couple of pictures. Let me see what I took the pictures of. I don't even remember now. Oh, she was shown a couple of progress notes that said Sally Smith followed throughout the hospitalization. That's what one physician wrote about her. And another one said Dr. Sally Smith was heavily involved in her care. But yet she maintained, nope, 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 nope. I was there to do a medical evaluation. So the jury asked questions about her accessing those records. They caught on to that right away. Her accessing the records when they know. People should know if you've ever worked in a hospital. That's one, When you go into the hospital as an employee, one of the things that is required, at least in the state of Florida where I worked as a risk manager, I would have to give a 1 hour presentation. And during that presentation to the new employees, I would have to tell them, you're not allowed to access the medical records unless you have a reason to be in that record, like you're a treating physician. You're not allowed in that record, even if it's your own record. No. And they do monitor that. They monitor, they have, what do they call them? Compliance experts who are monitoring to see who's accessing those records. And if you get caught, you are fired. Yes. So that was a jury question. Then, outside the presence of the jury, the judge sends the jury to lunch, and they're going to do a proffer, which is an offer of proof of a certain line of questioning that the judge did not want the jury to hear. He wasn't going to allow this questioning. And it was what did her report, did she issue a report? What was in the report? Who did she consult? How did she reach this conclusion? None of that stuff, because he had said, no, she's a treating, I'm letting her on the stand as a treating physician, not as an expert. So, and as an expert, if she had been allowed to be an expert, she would have been able to offer her opinion about other care providers. But in any case, when the jury's not there, he sends the jury to lunch, and then the defense asks her some questions, and a lot of the questioning went to her accessing those medical records. That was he did ask her about her report, and she apparently issued two reports, a preliminary and a final report. And she was asked about her conclusions. She said there was very strong evidence to support the presence of medical child abuse, which she recorded as Munchausen's by proxy. She did admit, now, cross-examination, her demeanor, she does not like Mr. Anderson. And the jury's not there, so she can make the faces and do whatever it is she wanted to do. And I'm telling you, she must have left a broomstick at the at the door, because I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that about people. That's not nice. Okay, I'll take it. But look at the picture. Where's the broomstick? Okay, so she felt like Beata was suffering from Munchausen by proxy, and that Maya had conversion disorder, which she said now it's called a functional neurological disorder. But she did not believe that she had CRPS. She admitted that she did talk to Dr. Kirkpatrick, and that he had confirmed to her that he had diagnosed the CRPS. He's the one that sent them over to Mexico. He had diagnosed her, and that he warned her, don't go after the Kowalskis. Do not go after the Kowalskis. They are not abusing their child. She has chronic regional pain syndrome, or complex regional pain syndrome. So she was asked about that, and she says it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant what he said all that, but that's irrelevant to me. I am hired to do an evaluation. You know, the thing that's interesting is that she was asked, did you include what he told you in your report? No. My job was to evaluate for the evidence of child abuse. And if I find the evidence, he goes, well, wouldn't it also be to record any evidence you found that there wasn't child abuse? Like Dr. I wrote Dr. Kowalski, Dr. Kirkpatrick telling you he diagnosed CRPS. Why wouldn't you put that in your report? She didn't. She said it was the fact that other doctors diagnosed this child with CRPS was totally irrelevant and unreliable. She said, there's doctors and then there's doctors. What? So I'm glad the jury didn't get to hear any of that. The reason they do a proffer or an offer of proof outside the presence of the jury is to preserve testimony for appellate purposes. Both sides are going to appeal whatever the decision is regarding that particular testimony going in front of the jury. The judges already said, no, it's not. But they think, yes, it should come in front of the, the jury. But so they're going to appeal. Whatever the decision is, it'll probably be appealed. The appellate court will now have, they'll say, well, we wouldn't know, we don't know how she would have testified. We don't know what her answers would have been. Well, now you do. Here's the proffer. So that's the purpose of that. The final question to her, which I thought was great. Were you a medical investigator or a medical prosecutor? Argumentative. Yeah, it was sustained. Objection sustained. She didn't have to answer that, but I loved it. I loved it. And she kept giving Mr. Anderson dirty looks. She'd been deposed 5 times. 5 times. You should have seen her face when the judge said, "You are released," which means they cannot call her back to the stand. She's done with this case, she thinks. And she was like, "Yay, I'm out of here." Okay. All right. Let's talk about, oh my God, we're 38 minutes in here. You know what? I think I'm going to do a separate video. Let me do a separate video where I will talk about the Adelson case. I think it'd be better in a separate video because I've already gone 40 minutes. So this is the first episode for the day. Take a look. Look for part 2. Look for the part about the Adelson so you can get that testimony. And I'll see you in the next video.